Welcome to Storytime. This week we're going to be reading The Walls of Jericho. A boy named Peter walked beside the river Jordan with his father. They saw a pile of big round stones. Peter asked, "What's that?" "These are the 12 stones, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel," said his father. "These stones remind us of the miracle." "What miracle?" Peter asked, looking out across the wide river. "Ah, you were too young to remember," his father said. "You see, the Israelites had escaped from Egypt. Moses had died, and Joshua was now leading the Israelites to the Promised Land. When they got to the river Jordan, it was swollen to the top of its banks. The Israelite priests were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, the chest that held the 10 Commandments. God told Joshua to send his priests into the river. "Into the river?" asked Peter. "Are you sure that is what God told Joshua? It does not seem right. They would all drown." "But they did not," said his father. And that was the first miracle. Peter's father continued. "When the priest stepped into the river, it stopped flowing. The priest stood there while the Israelites crossed the dry riverbed. When everyone had reached the other side and the priest stepped onto the bank, the river began flowing again. But what was not the only miracle. Do you want to hear what happened next?" "Oh yes," said Peter. He settled down beside the pile of stones and listened as his father told the story. After the Israelites crossed the river, they had to pass through the city of Jericho to get to the Promised Land. A great stone wall surrounded the city. The only way in or out was through iron gates. The people of Jericho knew the river of Jordan had stopped flowing when the Israelites crossed. They knew God was helping the Israelites, and they were afraid. The king of Jericho ordered the people to shut the iron gates. When Joshua and the Israelites got to Jericho, they found the gates locked. Joshua walked around the wall looking for a way to get inside, but it was no use. There was no way in. Joshua headed toward the gates and came upon a man holding a sword. Joshua stopped and asked, "Are you our friend or our enemy?" "I am the commander of God's army," said the man. "Listen carefully to what I am about to tell you." Joshua listened. This stranger was God's messenger. When the man finished speaking, Joshua knew what God wanted him to do. He ran back to camp and gathered the priests around him. "Lift the Ark of the Covenant," Joshua said, "and carry it around the city. 7 of you will walk in front of the ark, blowing horns." The priests set off around the wall, blowing their horns while the Israelites followed quietly behind them. They circled the city once, then went back to their camp. The next morning, the Israelites rose at dawn. Again, the priests carried the ark around Jericho. Again, 7 priests trumpeted their horns, and again the Israelites followed quietly. They circled the city once, and then went back to camp. The Israelites did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, Joshua said, "The priests will carry the Ark of the Covenant and blow their horns, just as before, and we will follow quietly, just as before. But today we will circle the city 7 times. On the 7th time, listen closely. I will tell you what to do." The Israelites marched around the city 6 times. On the 7th time, Joshua yelled, "Shout! Cheer! God has given you the city." The priests trumpeted their horns. The Israelites shouted as loudly as they could. Above the shouting, they could hear cracks and groans. The cracks spread across the walls. The walls of Jericho began to tremble. The Israelites shouted louder and louder. One stone fell from the wall, then another and another. The walls of Jericho tumbled to the ground in a pile of dust. It was truly a miracle. The Israelites cheered. They were able to pass through the city. And that, said Peter's father, is how the Israelites conquered the great stone walls of Jericho. That is how they passed through Jericho on their way to the Promised Land. "They did not use swords?" asked Peter, "or spears?" "No," Peter's father said, shaking his head. "They had a tool more powerful than 1,000 swords and spears. They had the most powerful tool of all. They had their faith in God." That's story time for this week. Thank you all.